Chapter 6. The Masked Fiends. Outside the old district, the man who had just set up the quarantine zone sat beside a road sign, glancing back at the still and eerie half of the old district. With a sigh, he pulled out his phone and started playing a game of Candy Crush. Hey man, why are you sitting here playing on your phone in the middle of the night? Aren't you afraid of getting a cold butt? Soon, a passerby walked up from across the street and chuckled at the scene. The man glanced up briefly before returning his focus to the game. Nothing better to do, just killing time? The passerby laughed, pulling out a cigarette and offering it to the man. The man shook his head, looking serious. I'm on duty, no smoking. Seriously? You're just sitting here playing on your phone and you call this work? The passerby was amused. Yep. All right then. The passerby shrugged and turned to head down the street behind the man. Where are you going? The man called out. Home. You can't go home, at least not right now. The passerby raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? This road is closed for now. You'll have to wait until it's open before you can go back. The man pointed at the road sign behind him. The passerby looked at the sign, which had a "No Entry Ahead" notice, and was about to respond when the four big characters flashed with a brief glimmer of light. His expression went blank. Moments later, he slowly turned around and walked back the way he came, looking dazed and confused. The man, seemingly unfazed by this, was about to get back to his game when a voice crackled through his earpiece. Zhao Kongcheng. The moment he heard the voice, the man snapped to attention, his previous relaxed demeanor vanishing, replaced by stern seriousness. Yes, Captain? What's the situation? We've got a problem. Among this batch of masked fiends, one has promoted to a masked king. While we were busy dealing with the others, it ambushed and seriously injured Hong Ying and escaped through the sewer, leaving the quarantine zone. A masked king. Zhao Kongcheng's face changed. Which direction did it go? I'll intercept it. No, Kongcheng, you're not suited for combat. You can't take on a masked king. I'll handle the chase. Zhao Kongcheng hesitated. So, what should I do? After the masked king fled, two more masked fiends took the opportunity to slip into the sewer. Everyone else is busy dealing with the remaining masked fiends and can't help. Which direction? Southeast. Got it. With a glint in his eye, Zhao Kongcheng sprinted to the end of the street, jumped into a black van, and slammed the gas pedal. The engine roared as he sped off, the van's interior filled with a neatly folded black and red cloak and a sheathed straight sword. I'm turning off here. I'll see you guys later. Wang Xiao stopped and turned to the four people behind him. Just then, Li Yifei suddenly remembered something and said, Wang Xiao, if I'm not mistaken, your home is near the old district, right? Yeah, why? It's nothing. Just be careful on your way back. Wang Xiao's lips twitched slightly as he rolled his eyes. If you have something to say, just say it. Don't leave people hanging like this. Li Yifei hesitated for a moment. I've heard that things have been unsettled around the old district lately. There's a psycho killer on the loose. A psycho killer? Are you serious? Zhang Qian's face showed disbelief. Absolutely serious. Li Yifei glanced around and lowered his voice. You might not know, but there have been a dozen or so deaths in the old district in the past few days. A dozen people? That's impossible. If it were that big of a deal, it'd be all over the news. Wang Xiao shook his head. Hey, it's not impossible. This thing is really sketchy. The higher-ups have been suppressing the news. If my dad didn't work at the police station, I wouldn't have known anything. Sketchy? What's so sketchy about it? Apparently, Li Yifei paused, lowering his voice even more. Apparently, the victims had their faces completely skinned off. All that was left was a bloody mess and protruding eyeballs. The methods are extremely brutal. A chill swept over us as the evening breeze blew. Hearing this, we all felt a shiver run from our toes to our heads. Li Yifei, are you out of your mind, talking about this stuff in the middle of the night? Zhang Qian's face turned pale as she glanced around the silent street, clearly agitated. This area was already on the outskirts of the old district, a remote part of Cangnan City. With it being late at night after classes, the streets were empty, and Li Yifei's words only added to the creeping fear. Not just Zhang Qian, but even the two guys, Wang Xiao and Lu Yuan, looked uneasy. Wang Xiao glanced at the narrow alley he was about to walk through and suddenly felt apprehensive. If Li Yifei's words were unsettling, Lin Chia's next comment was enough to make our skin crawl. Lin Chia pondered for a moment before speaking in a low, haunting tone. Are you sure? This is the work of a human? Chia, you? Jiang Qian's body trembled. Wang Xiao and Lu Yuan exchanged strange glances, their expressions turning awkward as they looked at Lin Chia. So, the one with the most hidden depth is actually Lin Chia? Li Yifei stared at Lin Chia in shock. You think so too? Shut up, shut up, shut up. Jiang Qian couldn't take it anymore and pinched Li Yifei's arm hard, making him cry out in pain. Stop telling ghost stories in the middle of the night. I still need to go home. Li Yifei, wincing and rubbing his arm, mumbled, This isn't a ghost story. Wang Xiao shrugged. I'm not going to stand around and chat about this nonsense. I don't believe in these ghostly things. I'm leaving. Wang Xiao's figure gradually disappeared into the narrow alley. Jiang Qian glared at Li Yifei once more, then walked a few steps forward, suddenly stopping. She sniffed the air, frowning slightly, and a look of confusion crossed her face. Turning to the others, she asked, Do you guys smell something? Smell something? Yeah, like something rotting. I don't smell anything. Lu Yuan, do you? I don't either. Oh. Before Lu Yuan or Li Yifei could finish their words, their faces changed dramatically. They clutched their noses, fearfully scanning their surroundings. Lin Chia was about to say something when an unbearable stench suddenly filled his nostrils. It was like a mix of rotten meat, left for days, with a splash of rotten eggs. Just the smell alone made his stomach churn violently. It was the worst smell Lin Chia had ever encountered. Jiang Qian, with the most sensitive nose, immediately doubled over and started vomiting. What the hell is that smell? Li Yifei shouted, covering his nose. No idea. Lin Chia furrowed his brows, then pointed towards the alley Wang Xiao had gone down. But based on the direction of the smell, it seems to be coming from there. Just then, a chilling scream echoed from somewhere nearby, piercing through the still night air. Chapter 7. I Want to Live. Wang Xiao, Li Yifei, and the others shouted in unison when they heard that familiar voice. They exchanged glances and dashed towards the alley where Wang Xiao had disappeared. Lin Chia stood alone, frowning as he stared at the dark alley. He felt an uneasy premonition. Old neighborhoods, twisted murderers, strange stench, screams. Something didn't add up. After hesitating for a moment and battling with himself, he sighed in resignation. He picked up his white cane and ran towards the alley. Normally, Lin Chia would have avoided such situations. He would have bolted in the opposite direction, as far away as possible. If people are screaming, it's clearly something bad. And bad means trouble, robbery, murder, or witnessing a crime scene. None of that appealed to him. He wasn't curious enough to find out what was going on and didn't have the heroic impulse to intervene. Most importantly, he didn't know how to fight. What if he ended up dead? But this situation was different. If they hadn't been escorting him home, Wang Xiao might have taken another route or returned a few minutes earlier and avoided this mess altogether. He didn't like getting involved, but he hated feeling indebted even more. At the very least, he had to see what was happening, even if it meant just checking and then running away if it was dangerous. Though his eyes were still closed, he moved swiftly, tightening his grip on his cane. The closer he got to the screams, the more his brow furrowed. The stench grew stronger. Ah! A second scream came from around the corner, and this time it was a woman's voice. Jiang Qian. Lin Chia abruptly stopped at the alley's turn. In his mental perception range, he saw Jiang Qian and the others. Not far in front of him, Jiang Qian was crumpled on the ground, her mouth wide open in terror, her whole body trembling. In front of her, Lu Yuan and Li Yifei stood frozen like statues, their eyes glued ahead, also trembling. Beyond that, Lin Chia couldn't sense it. His eyes were still closed, so he couldn't see the world. His mental perception only reached 10 meters, which put him in a rather awkward position. Within 10 meters, he could sense everything. Beyond that, he was as good as blind. What had terrified Jiang Qian and the others so much? Although he couldn't see, his hearing was sharp. He clearly heard a rustling sound from nearby. It was like someone was gnawing on something, doing it with wild enthusiasm, as if they were savoring every bite. It sounded like little Black Lay chewing on bones. What's happening? Lin Chia asked in a low voice. Jiang Qian seemed startled by his presence, clutching at his clothing in a panic, her teeth chattering. A monster. A monster is gnawing on Wang Xiao's face. Lin Qia's face turned ashen. Run! Lin Qia and Li Yifei shouted simultaneously. As soon as the words were out, Lu Yuan, like a mad dog, spun around and bolted. After colliding with Lin Qia's shoulder, he staggered but quickly got back up and continued running for his life. Monster! Help! Somebody! Monster! He screamed as he ran. Lin Qia was caught off guard by the collision, stumbling for a moment. Just then, a heavy thud echoed from the distance. It sounded like a bear was charging toward him. Jiang Qian's pupils shrank. With unknown strength, she shot up from the ground and ran, screaming. As for Li Yifei, he had already taken off the moment he yelled, "Run!" moving faster than Lu Yuan had pushed Lin Qia. If Lu Yuan hadn't collided with him, Li Yifei would have already been far ahead. But that split-second delay meant he was now trailing behind, just like Jiang Qian. At this moment, everyone seemed to have forgotten Lin Qia's disability. The classmates who had promised to escort him home had completely abandoned him. Faced with such a bloody and terrifying scene, fear overwhelmed everyone's minds. Lin Qia had only taken a few steps when something burst into his 10-meter mental perception range. It looked somewhat like a human, but not quite. It resembled a person because it had limbs and a head, but it ran on all fours like a hyena, and its body was as massive as a bear. Most strikingly, it had a ghastly face, pale and twisted. Its long, red, serpent-like tongue extended half a meter from its mouth, writhing and twisting. Lin Qia's face turned grim. The creature was too fast. In just a few steps, it had closed the distance from beyond 10 meters into his mental perception range and was rapidly closing in on him. He could feel a strong gust of wind from behind. Jiang Qian felt it too. Her face went pale, fear and panic filling her. She stiffly turned her head to gauge how far the monster was. It should be far, right? Don't look back. Lin Qia's voice rang out, but it was too late. Jiang Qian's pupils contracted as the monstrous face was almost pressed against hers, its bloody stench overwhelming. Ah! The scream echoed through the alley. She closed her eyes tightly, trying to pull off her backpack to use it as a weapon against the monster. She was completely panicked. A backpack wasn't a weapon, and she wasn't a trained warrior. In life-or-death moments, the first to lose their composure is often the first to die. The monster yanked the backpack strap with brute force, sending Jiang Qian tumbling to the ground. A heavy shadow suddenly fell, crashing down on her. In the next moment, the night was stained red with blood.